Welcome back. You're watching The Firm. For over a decade and more, the Reserve Bank of India has played a key role in determining the rules of the foreign investment game. So while the government decides on FDI limits and ownership and control thresholds, the RBI determines pricing thresholds for the entry and exit of foreign investment in Indian equity and debt. Well, not anymore. The Finance Act 2015 deletes RBI's control over FDI investments via equity. It says the central government may prescribe permissible classes of capital account transactions not involving debt instruments and the conditions that may be placed on such transactions. So it is a momentous change of guard that's about to take place. And to talk about it, I have with me Ashwath Rao of Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas and Vivek Gupta of BMR. Gentlemen, to both of you, a warm welcome. Ashwath, Section 6 of FEMA 1999 has been amended. Certain specific aspects of provisions in it have been deleted. But as yet, no government notification has come out suggesting what the new regime should be. What prevails right now?
So, Menkat, in three parts. Firstly, the Act has been passed, as a result of which FEMA stands amended. But the Act itself, in its language, says that it will not become effective till the government notifies it. As far as I'm aware, it's not yet been notified. Correct. But even assuming that it is notified, without the government actually prescribing rules, the amendments to FEMA itself, I think in Section 47(3), very clearly say that until such time that the government supersedes it through rules or regulations and replacement, the current rules and regulations framed by the RBI under FEMA will continue to apply.
Yeah, Vivek, this applies to FDI and ODI and all of that. So all of that which was erstwhile under the control of RBI will now hereon be under the control of the Government of India, specifically the Finance Ministry?
Yes, that's right. So the only thing that stays back with RBI is debt. And the power to define what is debt vests with the central government.
Okay, so the first tricky issue to deal with here is what is debt and what is not debt. And I suppose the two of you will agree with me that a bunch of convertibles, FCCBs, etc., will probably qualify under the government's definition as non-debt. So it will be purely debt instruments like non-convertible debentures that will sort of come under the gamut of debt.
What I do expect is that the government will have to take a clear position on mezzanine or hybrid instruments. Instruments that carry the character of both debt as well as a certain return. Till now, the distinction that RBI has been maintaining has been very clear. Anything which has any element of debt basically falls within your ECB guidelines, unless it's compulsorily convertible. I expect the government to come out with a definition which addresses the issue of how hybrids, like convertibles that you mentioned, will get treated.
Let's look at it in two parts, Menka. I think one part of it is we do hope that the government does what Vivek just said they should do. And I do hope they clarify that hybrids are possible under the category of permitted capital account transactions.
And hybrids would come under the government's jurisdiction and not RBI's debt jurisdiction.
Correct, and that they will permit those instruments with whatever conditions they may think is appropriate. Because, frankly, one of the biggest problems that clients investing from overseas have faced whilst operating in the Indian market is, given the complexity of the commercial deals that are valid bona fide commercial deals and what they see in other markets, they need the flexibility to arrange the economics through those kind of instruments.
Okay. So the first test of whether this momentous change of guard is going to be one that causes cheer or concern will be how they define debt, really. The second test really is going to be whether the government is more conservative than RBI in the guidelines that it puts out, or it's less conservative than RBI. It's really difficult to tell. I'm going to ask both of you to speculate, but based on your past experiences on issues where the government and the RBI have disagreed. For instance, and let me bring up the two experiences or instances that are public. When it came to the 2009 press notes on how to define foreign ownership and control, the RBI took some 3, 4, 5 years to notify those changes in FDI policy, giving us all the impression that the RBI never agreed with the government on those new definitions. So that was one area of difference in opinion. The second area of difference in opinion has been call and put option. The RBI did not think call and put options were permissible. Then they sort of changed their mind halfway through the Tata Docomo situation, and then sort of applied the old regs to Tata Docomo. Docomo. Then they promised in a monetary policy will come out with liberal guidelines. Now they have no control and the government will have to do that.
I'm optimistic on this one.
Okay.
I think the government will be more liberal. And I think the reason why they will be more liberal, Menka, is the stated objective of this current government, with the Prime Minister having said this in multiple venues on multiple occasions, is that they want to make the ease of business in India much better. They want to attract foreign investment.
All that's good, Ashwath, but remember Tata Docomo.
No, I think, Menka, let me come to that specific in just a second, but I think the point I was trying to make is basically if you look at it from a policy perspective, right, the government is a lot more aligned towards facilitating foreign investment than the RBI would be from a mandate perspective, because the RBI's monetary policy perspective is entirely different.
I get that. So the RBI has typically often used this for exchange control.
Basically.
The government will use this to make cohesive FDI policy. I get it.
And that's the hope from a policy perspective.
Got that, yeah.
Now, getting into the specific of what you're saying, just generally speaking, if you look at the objection that could have been there, there is a stated policy, and if you're going to basically make exceptions from a stated policy, there are legal ramifications. Tomorrow somebody could basically take it to court and challenge it.
I get that. So are you saying that the government agreed with the RBI but was just cautious about no diversion from extant policy? Or did you actually believe, because nobody knows what the government's real position is on this.
No,
therefore I'm asking.
I don't know either, Menka, and I think there's speculation here.
Vivek, you're closer to the government than either Ashwath or I are, at least geographically in that sense. What would you say? Will the government be more conservative than RBI?
Well, conceptually, I think I agree with Ashwath. I think it is the government's mandate to promote foreign investment. It is not the RBI's direct mandate to do that. RBI is more of a regulator in the central bank. So one would imagine, one would expect that the government would be more liberal in prescribing these guidelines. I wonder though, and this is all of course speculation, I wonder though whether there's an old RBI and whether there's a new RBI.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up, because the new RBI is the one in the monetary policy that promised liberal guidelines on call and corruption.
So I would hope that the government is more liberal, although I thought that we were seeing the beginnings of a new RBI which was in any case moving along a more liberal track. But as I said, this is all speculation. At the end of the day, we are sort of bothered about what the result is. And we have a list of what we would want the government to do.
Okay, let's get down to that list. Let's get down to the list, right? Because that's equally important. This is the time when you can have, be heard at the finance ministry, I suppose, while they're drafting these regulations. So what's on your list of what you hope the government will tackle in these new regulations?
So I think there is a basic case to be made that where we stand in our investment cycle and what the needs of India are presently, we need definite flexibility in terms of recognizing what I call mezzanine hybrid capital. Now, I fully understand the government's concerns around it. I fully understand the fact that we have seen Asian crisis and we've seen currency crisis, and the government has to guard against it. But there are very many paths on which the government can move and start to bring in hybrid elements one by one, watch what happens, and then open it up fully. So, for example, government could say for certain specified sectors, infrastructure, roads, ports, etc., we will allow hybrid elements, for example. Certain categories of investors, we will allow things like liquidation preferences openly. We will allow call and put options in a more regular commercial format, without people like Ashwath having to resort to huge legal gymnastics to write it in the legal documents.
Okay, Ashwath, what's on your laundry list?
No, and I think I agree with the primary point he's made. But just to give this a little bit of meat in the hope that people are listening, I would think the areas would probably be divided into two categories. Some which fell within the RBI's domain previously, and others which actually fell already within the government's domain.
Right.
I think within what was in the RBI's domain previously, one would, apart from instruments, look for flexibility as far as pricing is concerned. I mean, today I think the RBI has taken it a long way to basically say, get a valuation, in an internationally accepted methodology, which I think is a big step for them to have taken, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for a foreign investor, because at the end of the day, if there is a valuation that has to be put in place at the time of an exit, and let's assume for a second that's an unhappy exit situation, there are many things that can be done to thwart that valuation.
Investigating do away with pricing
altogether.
Thresholds altogether in that sense.
I mean, you said it's a wish list. So it's
go ahead. Then next.
And the other part of it is things like, deferred consideration, escrow arrangements for holdbacks, indemnities, etc., are all global practice. Today, there are restrictions, there are need for getting approvals, etc., complicates deals, creates a lot of frustration. I mean, indemnities are very common. To have a portion of the purchase consideration held back is, something that is international market practice today. Why not do it here as well? And allow that to happen. Moving on quickly to the government's bucket, which I actually think has bigger.
This is the big one, right?
Items.
I think, yeah,
Absolutely.
okay, yeah.
I think today control is in a state of complete confusion.
The definition of control is confusing right now.
It is absolutely. I mean, the problem over here is, whilst it's been aligned across statutes, which is a good thing, there is still no clarity in relation to what it really means. I mean, does a person have control if they have veto rights? The old debate in relation to negative and positive control.
But this is not just a foreign investment problem, right? Ashwath, this is a problem with even how SEBI looks at control, and therefore how CCI looks at control, and how every other regulator in the country who draws from, let's say, capital markets regulations looks at control. It is a qualitative threshold and not just a quantitative threshold.
I agree, Menka, but I think it hits us very badly in the context of foreign investment because it creates uncertainty in relation to what constitutes control, particularly since you have rules like the FOCC, foreign-owned and controlled company rules, etc., which then impact what a foreign-owned company can do on a downstream basis, etc. You have a situation today where, because of the control requirement being emphasized in the context of insurance, there are a bunch of people who made investments and are holding 26%. And they have a set of rights which were actually approved by the government and the regulators when they made the investment. Are you going to go back and tell them that now that you're going from 26 to 49%, you can't have, there's a clear distinction to my mind between what constitutes minority protection and what constitutes control, right? I think we have that clarity that can be spelled out from a legal standpoint. Yes, it's always going to be debated. But the problem that you have today is from the standpoint of how the regulators are approaching it, at least my sense is one feels there's no distinction between the two. Between control and minority protection. And let's be clear, investors are not going to invest, billions of dollars of capital without being able to protect it. The second is the FIPB approval process itself has to be simplified. I think over the years, I remember when I started practicing, it used to take 8 weeks. And if it was 10 weeks, one felt that it had taken too much time. Today, you're talking about a minimum of 3 to 4 months. Sometimes, it takes 6 months. I've had applications
in some sectors. Be careful, you'll be shouted down like Deepak Parekh was. Be very careful, Ashwath.
But
sorry.
I think the limited point, and the government is already seized of this, Menka. I think the limited issue is that you have, 13, 14 ministries that need to comment on every single application, right? And the question is, are you necessarily going to have to approve, everything that is currently under the approval route, or should the approval route only be limited to areas where you either have a sectoral problem or a national security consideration?
Vivek, I have a few seconds left. Is there anything that Ashwath has not already asked for that's on your list?
No, so I would only say that a lot of what he said as a wish list from the government side, while I support it fully, is something that didn't require the Section 6 amendment to happen.
Of course not. It's separate, as you pointed out. Yeah.
So that could have been seen in any way by the government, and hopefully government will see it.
Well, I have no doubt that both of you have longer wish lists, but we're entirely out of time. And technically, this is just the first part of this discussion. We'll have both of you back when we do actually get the final regs. So thank you, Ashwath. Thank you, Vivek, for joining us this week. And thank you very much for watching. We'll be back next week.